Hi there. Welcome to the Value Creation Mindset podcast. I'm your host, AJ Singh. This show is about the choices successful business leaders make to create maximum value for their customers and themselves. Today, I am joined by Pieter van Schalkwyk, CEO of XMPro. Peter, I'm sure I botched your name. What's the right pronunciation?
Van Schalkwyk, but Van Schalkwyk is perfect as well.
All right. Very good. And where are you as of right this moment, Peter?
At the moment, I'm in Brisbane, Australia, but heading out to the US tomorrow. So I travel a lot to see the world, but right now in sunny Brisbane.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I'm in not so sunny Seattle at the moment. All right. So in this episode, we will unpack the decisions that changed the trajectory of Peter's business. Talk a little bit about the trade-offs made, what you would do again, what you wouldn't do again, and basically try to teach our listeners and our viewers the frame of mind you've found that creates the most value for your customers and for yourself and for your business. Is at the end of the day, the basic premise of this podcast and my perspective is that any business leader always starts with the same inputs. You've got people, you've got technology, you have some amount of capital. And it's our jobs to focus all of those inputs through a lens of shared vision and hopefully effective leadership in order to create maximum value. And it's that focusing effect that is so hard to find, because I think we've all seen cases where a company and a leader has a lot of capital, excellent people, and amazing technology, and they still end up lighting it all on fire. So the choices that you made, that you avoided, are what I'd like to explore a little bit more on this call, or on this podcast, I should say. So that said, Peter, you're a mechanical engineer by training, as am I. So I think we have kind of a common ground there. How did your experience in training as a mechanical engineer shape your outlook and shape the decision-making process which you've embraced over the years?
Great question. I think it's one of the kind of, especially in the space where we are, where you are trying to apply emerging and new technologies to solve things that have previously not been solved. Bringing a classical engineering mindset of troubleshooting, understanding the problem, breaking it down to first principles. Those are all core things that I think are sometimes missing when you just start with a shiny new object and, what can we do with this thing, rather than go back to the grounding that you've had in terms of analytical thinking around it. But not just that, it's that practical experience when you have been on kind of the customer's shoes, understanding the reality of what they are trying to do, and then again, that first principles of breaking it down into the constituent parts. And before you start with, here's the solution, or here's my great shiny new toy that I can help you with. So for me, that journey of going through kind of that practical or the engineering training, but also that practical application of it, where you had to deal with the laws of physics, laws of thermodynamics, laws of not just mechanical engineering, but all the physical world that we live in, and how you now solve problems for that world, especially in the space that we are, because we do focus on the industrial space. asset intensive, complex, heavy industry. So that's really helped us to shape, from a value perspective, what we are doing for our customers.
No, I love that. I remember when I was in college, I would talk to my father, who was also a mechanical engineer, and in every single call, he would tell me two things. One, focus on the fundamentals, and you can derive everything else. So it made me realize there are fundamental first principles. You're studying mechanical engineering, you get to believe it. When you shift into software, I believed it because I came from the mechanical world, but a lot of computer science folks, a lot of people who've just been coding for all their lives, they still haven't quite grasped that there are timeless first principles there as well. Some do, some don't, I suppose. But the second thing that my father always told me, and this is how he ended every single phone call, he ended up telling me, stay rational. And in my life, as I've grown the business, that still rings in my ear. So I certainly get that.
Yeah, and I still have those conversations daily as well, where we go, just step back and what's the real problem you're solving? Again, that first principles thinking of stop and think about it, and then apply again that analytical process that you're being taught as in mechanical, electrical,
Right.
civil. Doesn't matter what kind of fundamental
Exactly.
engineering approach, but it's that kind of breaking the problem down and again stopping and assessing the situation before you just go to the next solution, and also coming up with what are the real root causes for some of the challenges that we've seen, both what the customers are trying to do, but also internally in our own business. When you are faced with a decision to make, how do you do it in the best way again? And sometimes you have to stop the teams to say stop and let's reassess this based on those fundamental skills.
Yeah, no, it's there seems to be a rush for software folks to, you have an idea, you want to jump from the whiteboard to the keyboard, and some of this is part of the excitement in the software space has always been, if you can come up with an idea, a solution to a problem, which for me always comes in the shower or in the bathroom generally. I don't know why, but that tends to be a fairly common phenomena. You can work on a solution and you can bring it to life and you can see your results just with your own two hands or with the hands of you and a couple of team members. But at the same time, I find myself asking my team members and my clients the same thing also. I mean, have you designed something? Are you going from the whiteboard to the keyboard? I thought it was a good idea to design something before you build it. I know it's a novel idea, but I would think in your space, in the oil and gas space and heavy industry, I mean, when you've got contact with the physical world, with physical machines, I mean, it's similar to, I think, my experience in the IoT space. When you add a hardware component to it, all of a sudden things become a lot more real and less esoteric, because a decision you can help a customer make has a massive physical impact on a job site, a company, the profitability of a particular project, success or failure of the overall endeavor. I mean, in the IoT space, if you screw up one firmware build and you push it out over the air to 10,000 devices, you think you can afford to make 10,000 field visits? Not so much. But that's just kind of, I do you find then that running close to the metal or close to the physical world really helps to shape and drive your software teams to be a little more pragmatic and rigorous?
Absolutely. And we have this concept of what we call phase zero. Phase zero is actually not So if you go to any software development cycle, we start with phase one, with business requirements, BRDs, all great things. But there's a phase zero, which is that forward deployment kind of engineering approach where go walk in the shoes of the customer, go down in the mine, go to 2 miles underground, drive around for 2 hours and understanding what they're doing and what is the real environment that your solution is going to work in. And also the other big outcome of a kind of a phase zero approach is, are we solving a problem that's worth solving in the first place? And is it technically solvable? Because I think sometimes we start with, or we create solutions and then go and see if we can find problems to solve that they solve. So if you do that phase zero kind of forward deployed, and assess the physical environment where these things are working, and then first part is, what is the, not so much the business case, but what is the part of this is making sure that there is a business case. But I think organizations sometimes forget, especially with more advanced, complex solutions, that you need to look at it sort of on a matrix, kind of a 2x2 matrix of technical complexity versus business impact, and assess during those initial phases if this thing is actually technically solvable with what you have right now, or is there something else that needs to be put in place? IoT, sensors, devices, other hardware or things, and then what is the business impact of solving that, and help identify and kind of cluster the solution that you doing around those use cases that fit into that. It's technically solvable and it has a high business impact, and focus on those, because that's where you provide value to organizations. Yes. Just to create more complexity, because I think one of the challenges that we see especially in the industries that we are, three big challenges. Systems are getting more complex. There's hardly a thing you can now that you buy that doesn't come with a new app, 5 dashboards and 6 alarm systems. So systems are and all hardware and things become a lot more complex. So operators that had 60 alarms a day now get 1,000 alarms a day. That's problem one. Problem two is people who understood what to do with the alarms are retiring. And I see you've also got a gray beard saying like, but it's not just the workforce that's retiring. It's actually because of the rate of change of technology. We're seeing that even people who stay in the jobs or don't stay up to date in terms of training. So there's a skills challenge, and all organizations have to do more with less. So they have to get more output for less input. So those are the drivers that we see. So if you don't start with that phase zero and kind of figure out which are the ones in the bucket, to deliver the actual value at the end of the day is really hard.
It is really hard. You've got to calibrate, where you invest, where you apply pressure, so you actually deliver value. Versus, again, I mean, I've had clients call me, ask me a piece of advice, 5-minute conversation, and so many times they've said, "God, I wish I called you 6 months ago. You would have saved me 6 months of team effort." And I'm like, sometimes you need that level of guidance and just basic course strategy that we, with our gray hair, we have a bit of perspective. And I think for a lot of team leaders, a lot of engineering teams, they're 2 inches away from it. That's all they see. And it's very easy to waste years working on something. And when you ask the hard questions of, okay, well, what value are you really creating here? I had a case where a friend of mine called me in to do what we call a Tech 360, which is just an overall review of R&D operations from a business perspective, from a core asset perspective, review the portfolio, the tech stacks, processes, team leaders, team members, everything. So we invested a lot of time there. We came up with our assessment. Went in, met with the CEO, my friend, laid it all out, and his conclusion was the same one that we kind of guided him to. So he looked at it and said, "So it looks like I've lit $20 million on fire over the last couple of years." I'm like, "Yeah, that's just the reality of it." And he was appreciative because we provided him a plan to turn things around, cut costs in half, and a dramatically increased value creation, right? And so it was a clear path forward, better for everyone. And I did my best to make this difficult news as easy to hear as possible.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
It wasn't good enough because I got a call a few days later after my friend, the now former CEO, explained the situation to his boss, who was the head of the conglomerate they were a part of, and he fired him on the spot. So I got my friend fired for telling him and the company the truth in a way that I made as hearable as I could. But these are some of the very difficult, hard to hear truths that determine whether you create value or not. And if you don't kind of touch grass and say and ask continuously, all right, is what I'm doing actually going to have a return? Is at some level, depending on the organization, obviously, I mean, sometimes technical leaders are more infatuated with particular technologies or building a fiefdom rather than solving a business problem and delivering value. And God, what is wrong with us? I mean, I don't, is it just, I mean, do you sometimes feel like the old man telling kids to stay off the grass? Because I do sometimes.
Well, you actually raise two interesting points for me. The first one is now with vibe coding and the ability to just burn tokens because they're cheap. You can get into this cycle of thinking you are building things, but again, not understanding what the real challenge or problem is that you are doing. So, tokens are cheap. And I can create different solutions, which brings me to the other kind of fundamental approach that I think is sometimes missed. But for example, with I'll use mining. We do a lot of work in mining. We work with the top miners in the world. And when you work with them to get into some of the, especially when you look at how technology will support them, that they have trade-offs that they make. Like, do we invest in a predictive maintenance program or just buy another truck? They cost the same. So those are the kind of things that, again, you work in the physical world. So if you go, I can build you a really smart AI model and it can predict when this truck will fail. They go, well, I'll buy another one. I've got one spare. Cost the same. It has its own complications. But those are the kind of real world scenarios that you sit with. So with them, in terms of the language and framing it, and I use the 4 buckets world with most of the industrials, is for them, they want to run more often. So strategically, if you talk to anyone in leadership, right through to the CEO, things that matter for them is we want to run more often. So it's predictive maintenance, all those things. We want to produce more when it is running. So first get me running and then make me help me get more. And then I want to produce a better quality or better yield. So that's the third bucket. And the fourth one is reduce my cost. Because in those type of industries like oil and gas, mining, and those, they don't control the price on market-related prices. Only thing they can control is cost. So, and that's why they're fanatical about those. But those are the four buckets. Like, again, run more often, produce more when running, extract more, and reduce costs. So it's simple language, but when you go with your solution, you have to put it into that bucket or frame it in that bucket. If you can't explain it to anyone, right from a foreman right through to the CEO in a mining company or a oil and gas or energy utilities, water utilities, doesn't matter. With that simple framing, so if you're going to vibe code and churn through tokens and it's not in one of those buckets, it's not going to go anywhere.
No, I love that. It shows a maturity in that business when there are these four core buckets. And I mean, you work at anything long enough and you sift through the noise long enough, you hopefully lock onto the signal. The handful of timeless things and principles and pillars that really need to guide every single decision. So in all the looking in the mirror that I've done over the years, there are again, and it's weird, there always seem to be four. I found four core pillars or buckets in commercial software development. Every decision, everything you possibly do, every engineering hour that is invested should either have a positive impact on revenue retention, net new revenue generation, increasing lifetime total value for your customers, or cost reduction. And this doesn't matter if you're paying for tokens or if you're investing in a new platform or buying a new machine or tripling down on agile, which, my God, can we please stop this already? It's like, yeah, you haven't figured out that agile generally equals make it up as you go along. But I mean, every decision, even down to what do you name a variable in a class or a method that no one ever is going to see for another 15, 20 years, except for the person who has to maintain whatever you might be building. Even that can be categorized into these buckets. So institutionalizing that, just as you said in mining, these buckets up and down the organization, everybody understands them. It is part of their shared vision. And they know that if you want to move the needle or get anything approved, it has to be put in that context. I'd love to see that same thing happen in the software space, more generally. And what can we do other than reinforce these fundamentals with whoever we engage with? Because they are fundamentals, aren't they?
There are fundamentals, and I think you raise a really good point. So as we're moving to more digital-based solutions where everything is software-defined, so it doesn't matter what it is, everything is becoming software. There's a foundational element, like, as you said, how do we name the variable so we can maintain it? It might not be that obvious to an end user, but we do need to find a way that we can explain the value of doing something like that foundational work right. From the start. And again, I do share your views on agile and some of these kind of make it up as you go. But doing the foundational engineering properly, that actually adds long-term value because the product now becomes sustainable, which and as a product developer, it also, for me, creates a stickiness to the product. Because because the customer now has a solid foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, it's easy to move the house. And I don't think everyone always appreciate the value of doing that proper engineering, digital engineering at the start, because again, everything is moving towards digital with call it digital twins, or doesn't matter, but that digital foundation, digital threads, and that needs to be built on well established or supporting patterns and practices. I'm sometimes hesitant to say standards, because I've seen you have standards of standards which contradict other standards. So what is fit for your business and what is fit for the purpose of what you're trying to do, but make sure that there's a foundation that you can build the value on. Otherwise, the value it's again, as a product developer or owner, there's no moat in that.
No, you couldn't be more right. The foundation of a platform, a product, I mean, let's make it, there isn't enough of a delineation between software development and product development. Software development, sure, vibe code it however you want. It's just coding. Look, my 9-year-old daughter can code, and with Claude, my 11-month-old puppy can probably code. That's not the freaking point. Yeah. What's the context? Are you laying down a very solid and completely deterministic foundation and architecture on which you can leverage LLMs, other inference technologies to create even more value? But if your foundation isn't solid and timeless, if your foundation, your core architecture, and it's not even so much about particular language or frameworks you end up using, it's the pattern, how much thought has been put into it. It's like, if your foundation is unstable, you can't build anything on it. You can't sell it. You can't generate a single dollar off of it. If it's stable but it's not scalable, forget it. What was the point? You can't grow. If it's stable and it's scalable but it's not profitable because you're consuming too many tokens to run it, or you built everything in AWS Lambda without checking the OpEx on any of this stuff, why even start if it's not profitable? And once it's stable and it's scalable and it's profitable, the fourth requirement, if you want long-term success on this, it has to be serviceable. But what does that mean? And it's a novel idea. You don't build a throwaway product. It's not building software. You're building a product, which happens to be software. But to make something serviceable inherently means you've thought about how to service it. You've made choices architecturally from a tech stack standpoint, from a development methodology perspective, from a backend schema perspective. You've thought about it and designed it and architected it and structured it in as modular of a way as you can, so you can adapt, you can build on top of it. You actually have a solid foundation and you're not built on sand. But as you said, I mean, again, living in the real world with real industries, with machines of any kind, it just puts much more focus on those timeless fundamentals that a lot of people don't seem to stress often enough. And in the great new world of generative AI, the reality is, to get real value from it, 80 to 90% of the effort is getting all the structure and the plumbing correct around it.
Absolutely. One of the areas that we focus a lot on, as we see, especially in this area where we're not replacing people's jobs because we cannot find them. there's some research from LNS, research that says for manufacturing in the US, your new hires, so you will lose 50% of the people that you hire in the first 90 days. So skills retention is a massive challenge. So one of the ways that we address that is through agents, and agents are everywhere. Everyone's got an agent now, which we can have a separate podcast just on agents, and agent washing, because everything is now an agent. So how can I now polish something up and call it an agent? So one of the areas that we're seeing a lot of interest is around how do we now build and construct these agentic workflows or processes or things like that. Now, what we've done in the solution that we've created, and maybe just a little bit of context. Again, there's so many agent frameworks and agent solutions. Two problems with them. One is I need to be careful how I phrase this. But you have, for example, ChatGPT and Claude and others. They've got this agent concept. So it can do something on my computer for me, for example. So it can help read my emails and draft replies. So some organizations see that as kind of the agent solution. We are trying to do some of the decision or the cognitive process. So not that content generation part, which again, there's a whole bunch of solutions that can do that. Now, the one problem with that type of solution is, and a lot of them are just a Python code, and what some organizations are discovering is that their IP are walking out the door because someone is literally just copying the prompt that says this is, and then go to the next platform, next company, plug it in, and it runs. So there goes the IP. So there's no protection, but also you need to understand what's in that code. The approach that we've taken is and based on our experience of building business processes in complex industries with governance and a lot of control measures, and because you can blow up stuff and you can kill people. So a 99% accuracy is not even good enough for some of the use cases that we're doing. So how do we bring agents and Gen AI was deterministic? So that's the kind of problem space that we are trying to solve. And in doing that, we built our agent platform to be parametric, so engineers can change parameters we love. We can dial knobs instead of write code, which is one part. But what we found in doing that, and that module that lives on top of our existing infrastructure, so this is just a kind of agent add-on that plugs on top. Mm-hmm. Out of the 40,000 lines of code in that, 10% of that code is LLM. 90% is the business process logic that you need to contain to build consensus mechanisms. How does it communicate? How does it handle conflict? How does it, all of that kind of the hard part of the problem, which you can't just run in a prompt. Now, some organizations, again, are trying to do that, and that's the IP that walks out the door because I can't contain because it's just in a text file. So it's really easy to move that along. But to your point, the real IP lives inside how that Gen AI solution uses the business process and the logic that sits in your application and your smarts. Is how can it enable that rather than replace that? And how can it enhance and augment that? Exactly. And that's, I think, some of the things that we're seeing in the space. But yeah, 90% is still classic programming thinking and software design. 10% is plugging a generative AI on top of it to handle some of the capabilities that it is designed to handle.
You are so exactly right. I just read an article about the former co-founder of OpenAI, just stating that the time of scaling is over. Now it's time to go back to research because there are some fundamental limitations in LLMs as people continue to chase AGI, which, okay, fine. You've got money, go do that. I'm not a galaxy brain. I'm not quite so interested in doing that. But the most interesting point in the article was a refound embrace of innate constraints, meaning business logic, meaning fundamental code that understands and implements rules for a particular problem space, which are definitional. These are structural. These are foundational. These are laws, because no LLM is aware of laws of physics or laws of mining or anything else. But so I guess even the galaxy brains are coming to this conclusion, which is nice to hear. Hopefully the market correction isn't too bad.
I think the shift that we'll see in terms of value creation out of LLMs will move to, okay, how do I now plug it into the process? And the process will still be king. And I'm just using process as a kind of a broad label around the logical part of what we need to do. The LLM is the AGI part is not going to solve. I always say to people, it's not. Generative AI is not a magic button. In actual fact, that we call it the magic button principle. We say, that principle does not exist. And so you cannot get this one thing that I give a simple prompt and it's going to do everything for me. It has some really good qualities and really useful components. So there's a capability in that. How do you leverage that capability combined with everything else that you know in your experience to build a better product that deliver better value? But don't think that will become the whole product. And again, that's what I think some of the larger AI companies want us to believe is, that will solve the whole problem. I still think, especially in business, where we understand the problem space, and then we always start with what is the problem, what analytic will solve it for me, what data do I need to do that with, and what analytic will solve it for me. I think we can come up with better, smarter, easier ways to do it using generative AI for some of it.
Sure.
But that formula is not changing.
No, look, it comes down to a fundamental question. Do you need to know the fundamentals? Do you need to know the problem space? Do you need to know the laws of physics? Why? When you can ask AI and it'll tell it to you. Fine, even if you learn it from AI, do you say at best, what's it going to be? 93% accurate? Are you going to believe everything? We've been in the generative, in the code generation space for 26 years now. So November 18th was our 26th anniversary. And at this point, we've got the ability to generate about 80% of the total code base needed for commercial platforms and products in 100% deterministic way. So you push the button 100 times, you get exactly the same results. And now we are folding in Gen AI components, LM components to build on top of that deterministic foundation, which is again built on timeless principles, right? I mean, it's not that difficult of a concept to embrace, but when customers are thinking that all they need to do is ask ChatGPT what they should do, or you have to talk them down sometimes, don't you? Just in terms of managing their expectations. I've read articles suggesting that the number of board members can be reduced by about 20% because now you can have AI chatbots replace them. And I suppose if you're that easily replaceable with a chatbot, yeah, I mean, you should go. Maybe you're not adding as a board member, but the additive way in which you've integrated Gen AI and LMs makes a ton of sense. How well is that working for you in reality? And how widely have you deployed it? Is it creating that net incremental value you were hoping for?
Yes, it does. So in both oil and gas and mining, and I can't go into the exact details of the use cases. These are, but tier one operators, and that's the interesting thing that we found. People who are really interested in pursuing this are the tier one. I would call them elite operators, people who already have a level of maturity to know and to have a deep understanding of their own business and the challenges that they are trying to solve. A lot of them have gone from and I'll use predictive maintenance as an example, or predictive operations. They've already built over the last few years a lot of AI based things, but more machine learning, um, uh, predictive algorithms. So they have a level of maturity around that. So the expectation, and they've had failures as well, so they know what failure looks like. It's not just always success in terms of those initial things. So they didn't have failure data, they didn't have just, but we're trying to predict failure. Well, you can't do that if you don't have failure data. So how are you going to train someone if you can't tell them what happened in the past? It's like training a doctor, but no one has ever done a certain operation. So these organizations have that level of understanding. And in the tier one, kind of both mining, more predictive maintenance, where they're also looking at autonomy. So because they already have autonomous equipment, trucks, machines, and things like that can self-diagnose now. They can order their own spares. So those are the use cases, and then they can drive themselves to the workshop. Humanoids can do some of the work. Combining that with other techniques, AI techniques, which are non generative, things like causal analysis, causal AI, where we're getting to what is the real problem that's causing this. So the human can then look down when the equipment is in the workshop to repair. The humanoid can do the basic, replace the oil filter or change the air filter, where the human then goes, based on the root cause, it looks like this is the real challenge that's causing the main breakdown kind of thing. So that's what we're seeing. That combination of the agentic teams can handle this at scale. So we can now use humans for that specialist skill and just planning, organizing all of that. So they're very successful with that. So, and the ROI is significant in a really short period of time. These things outperform humans every single time because they are not the you have individuals that perform much higher, but on average and based on consistency and 24/7 by 365, these things always run the same. So overall, the net gain in terms of variance not changing, or have limited variance, we're seeing significant numbers. The other one, for example, in oil and gas, running autonomous AI-based control rooms in a control center in like a DCS. Again, it's an operator issue. Every new piece of equipment comes with 10 times more alarms than the previous system. So the complexity, the cognitive burden, we still use humans to be the oversight and the governance. And I want to stress that because it's not like these things now. Is it possible to run fully autonomous in those organizations? Yes, but with a really big asterisk, because there's a lot of unknowns that, again, to your point earlier around generative AI and LLMs, which we've not tested the full boundary. So we need to also constrain them and put those hard stops on top and bottom where it does just automatically escalate to humans to help. The one thing that we have seen, and what's great with, especially in these large organizations where they have a lot of historical information as well as good. So, for example, the tier one miner, top miner in the world, they have the world's biggest failure mode database. So, and all the engineers know about it, but do they consult it every single time? No, it's just such a large volume of information. But my agent can do it every time.
Absolutely.
So that's the benefit that we're seeing and that we're bringing. So we make sure from a consistency and all of that, it can leverage all those other artifacts continuously, which humans are just not good at. So on average, we are outperforming humans or those it's not really repetitive tasks because it's not a deterministic predefined workflow. No, it could be, and because that's one of the benefits of a generative approach. It could almost like a human have a cognitive. The next step in the workflow is actually the best next action. There's not a flow diagram for it. So it's not just about repeatable or processes that are easy to automate, but it is those where we can I always say humans suck at certain processes. We do them because we have to, and those are the ones that they're really good at.
And our wives remind us of which processes we really suck at. Yeah, no, I get it. I that particular task, like LLMs and machine learning, AI generally excels at pattern recognition.
Absolutely.
And if you've got a large, continuously updated data set, which you need to filter, and in order to identify which alarms, say, are relevant and which might not be, I mean, that's an ideal case. I mean, in one of our IoT clients has a fleet of 500,000 devices. These are dash cams in trucks, and they are continuously monitoring driving behavior through AI deployed at the edge and processed and further filtered in the backend platform, and then ultimately pushed out through a set of TSPs. But when you're watching, say, when you've got a driver-facing camera and this driver is covering thousands of miles, the AI is smart enough to detect, right, is the seatbelt connected or not? Is the driver smoking? Is the driver drinking? Is the driver sleepy? Is the driver not looking right in front of them, right? And sure, you can generate alerts and alarms for all of these actions. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. How many of those actually create any value in terms of risk mitigation for the fleet operators? All they really care about is risk. And I mean, that drives insurance rates and everything else. So decreasing the noise and separating the signal from the noise, I think, is an ideal use case for LMs, as long as, again, the final determination is made by the human. Not in every case, but you want to leave that open because, again, if you've only got if you've got an agent that can tell you that there's 93% probability that your house is on fire, that's data you want to know. Or that your house is about to catch on fire, just to push this a little bit further, or that your extraction rig is about to fracture or have an event. this is all creating massive value for the customers. And the what's been the biggest what keeps you up at night, though, about how much customers are willing to turn over in terms of decision making? Because obviously you have a great deal of influence on how you advise them, how you package the overall solution. How far do you want to push this in terms of autonomous decision making, and what kind of safeguards do you think you would want to put in, or you've already put in? You spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's we see and again, our experience is mostly in these complex environments where governance and safety and things like that are real big concerns. So if I was to put a prediction engine into a new bookstore and I get 80% of the predictions right, that's pretty awesome. If in a oil and gas plant, I have to provide safe operations, and my can I live with a 0.1% margin of error? No, I can't. So we need to think about how do we separate the execution. So that's, again, things that keep us up at night is how do we build those compliance and governance and management frameworks in which makes the LLM useful for the parts that it can do. And one of the ways that we've done it is, so instead of the LLM actually being able to do the action, it can come up with the intent. I always like to explain it as they can observe, and again, we build cognitive ones, so they can observe and look at real-time data, and we ground them. We do first principles engineering, so we don't expect the LLM to hallucinate. Is this thing going to fail or not? No, we run it through a predictive model, which we would put on a dashboard for a normal human engineer as well. So run the same analysis, pass that, use that as part of their observations, and then they can reflect on that. And there's some stuff that we built around how to reflect, and that's how the brain works. So this is all mimicked on, or built on, research on how brains process information. And so we've taken that same approach. Then it can generate plans, and plans lead to action. So we've got all these actions that the agents then identify. Those actions are actually, in our world, really just intents or intentions. The actuation mechanism is something that you still need to build in a deterministic system, which handles rules and workflows and processes. So if I've not created that actuation mechanism, if it says switch on, switch off, if I've not created that as a physical hardwired data or business process, as I would do for a human pressing a button on a screen where it says switch on or switch off. So that separation of concerns is a really important part. The other part is to look at how do we build in from a governance perspective what is called deontics. So deontics is about what are the obligations, permissions, prohibitions, and those kind of we call it computable logic or rules and constraints that we can. So even if 2 or 3 agents work together, who's got the obligation? What permissions do I have to invoke another? So there's a lot of research, and we again try to base everything on as much classical research and things like objective functions, utility functions. These are well-established mathematical processes that we need to build in. So that's what keeping me up at night is how do we continuously build that execution layer using traditional classical software engineering and software and solution design principles, and use the LLMs for the part that it is really good at, and not
Right.
and create that separation of concerns So yeah, that's, and we also like to write and publish a lot around it because I think there's a lot of confusion. Again, if I'm just going to write all these prompts that are going to stick into some agent platform and now it's going to run, because that's really just a running engine. My code sits in all that. You have no control over what those things are actually doing. What's the auditing process? What's the governance process? What is the traceability? So every single observation reflection that we do come with a confidence score. And the confidence mechanism is a set of criteria you can change. In the organization, this would be how I look at governance and confidence. So when it comes up with, here's my recommendation, well, what's your confidence in it? What is your, with things like surprise? How is this anomalous in terms of everything else that you've seen? So those are we are thinking about, how do we build that in to make sure that we can trust what it is and we can trust what it does. Those are the two main things.
Didn't they, if you get in the Wayback Machine, didn't they used to call these expert systems back in the day?
Expert systems are completely rule based. So what we allow is that area in between. So yes, you still put the expert system on the boundaries,
right?
So that the expert system on the edges. And then inside this, we now have this opportunity to optimize and continuously optimize much better than what we could have done with the expert system, because there are a lot of novel and new things that we've not seen before, and our expert system just falls over because it doesn't have the rule for that. With these agentic systems, we can now deal with, because they are on an operating plant, there are thousands of potential combinations and permutations. You cannot write a expert system, but what you can write is an expert system that says, if the temperature goes above this, switch the damn thing off.
Yeah, the term that was ringing in my brain as you were describing this is, you need guarded actions. They have to be guarded by known deterministic rules, and the getting the mix right is an interesting challenge, and no doubt there'll be new innovations that are coming up shortly. The where are you thinking? I mean, where do you think things are going to go next? What are you most excited about that you'll be working on over the next 6 to 12 months?
It is definitely kind of end to end, so that we not and when I say end to end, right from the initial design, and putting the right structure in to do this, kind of at a repeatable and scalable, because what we're seeing is seeing a lot of people are experimenting with this. So how do we make this scalable, so that it's not a one-off or and again, this experimentation now moving to implementation. The other end of the scale is where we are now connecting this with physical AI, meaning those humanoids that go and do some of the actions. Again, putting it in these environments where we're working, you want to take people out of harm's way. So you don't want them to be underground in the mine if they don't have to be there, or if a certain situation. So how can we now connect this to the next level, but have a whole solution? Not, is it what we've seen at the moment are very isolated pockets of excellence.
Right.
So how do we, and because that's where the value comes from. The value comes from not from having bits and pieces working well and other bits and pieces not. It's like, how do we get this holistic overall solution that delivers the business outcome where we started? It needs to help me run more often. So how can this whole solution now help me run more often?
I love it. The when you said earlier, you need to know what failure looks like. I found that very interesting, because oftentimes, at the start of an engagement or when you're getting into something, you have to ask the question, what does success look like? So we all know what to look towards, but it's just as important to ask, what does failure look like? Now, in many cases, the answer, if people are going to be truthful, is, well, it looks like what we're at right now. But in this case, when you're dealing with physical AI, automation at scale, at that level, it's a whole other level of safety that you need to achieve. I sounds like an awesome challenge, honestly.
It is, but I do think it's a problem we're solving. We do see a challenge, because we are so reliant in our daily lives on things that come out the ground, whether we like it or not. We need power, we need electricity. We cannot drive any of this AI if we're not generating the energy to support that. So all of these industries, if we don't have water, if we can't have drinking water, we're in real trouble. Now, in terms of the complexity of the systems that run them, it's harder to get to those resources. They're deeper, they're harder to find. The optimization, and quite frankly, with the growth of population and the growth of skills supporting that are not keeping up. So there's a deficit in terms of people being able to run that. So it's a really important problem for us to solve. And it's not just us. I think as industrial solution providers trying to create a big bucket of who's all in the same opportunity to address that. Yes, it is a hard problem, and if it was an easy one, it would have been solved. But that's what we love. We like to go after the hard ones.
We do, don't we? Yeah. In the early days when we were looking for money, we went to a potential investor. We told them what we were trying to do, which is fundamentally automate a massive portion of the commercial software product construction process. And he looked at me and he said, AJ, why are you trying to do something so hard? And then he pointed to another company that he invested in. This is in the early 2000s. Said, look at these guys, two guys working out of a garage, selling cell phone ringtones at 99 cents a piece, and they're already at $2 million a year. So why are you trying to do something so hard? And I went home and I thought about that. It's like, there are easier ways to make money, but none of them are quite as interesting or challenging as this. So 26 years later, I mean, I'm still at it. But I get the drive for that. And I'd like to close today by asking you, I mean, there's always a reason that we get up in the morning. And for me, I really believe our legacy will be measured by how well and how far we lift all those we touch. And there are lots of ways of creating value for our customers, their employees, ourselves, everyone who we touch. But what do you want your legacy to be?
Again, really good question. It's the kind of one that you have in the back of your head, as you say, when you wake up in the morning, but it's not what you put on the back of the prog hole sitting on the. Look, it's, as I said earlier, for me personally, and coming from an engineering background and having worked in engineering for a really long time, I do think it's one of those underserved industries. It's not as sexy as some of the others. It's not a AI startup. It's not It's not a fintech. It's not. But in terms of where we are as a society and as a globally, these things are critical resources to continue to have access to for us and for our kids. And I don't think everyone understands the problem space. So for those who do, we actually do need to step up. It is a call to step up now. In order to make it sustainable, it needs to be commercial for us as well. So commercially, it needs to make sense so that we can also attract the right talent and everyone to do this, because we are competing, with the Googles and everyone else. I want to be an engineer at Google, or do I want to be someone looking at underground conveyors? So, in order to attract the right talent, it needs to be commercial as well. But that's not the driver. The driver for me and the organization, what we value is how can we contribute to making the resources that we need, water, electricity, the everything else that you touch that literally comes out of the ground. How do we move things along, whether what form of energy, whether it's renewable, whether it's it doesn't matter. How can we then improve the use and sustainability of that? And sustainability, I mean the long-term usability and the efficient use of it, not just from a kind of a carbon. Because quite often I get sustainable, people think immediately, oh, it's about carbon. No, it's about making the long-term usability and sustainability in an optimal way. That's really what drives us. And then also showing the next generation how to go about what we've learned. They can't learn from my mistakes, but hopefully they don't make them in the same way that I've made them.
Oh, I get you. I appreciate you, Peter. This is you get to a certain point in life and you ask yourself, why am I doing this? And we all need a purpose, and I respect yours. I thanks for going at it. I mean, it's you learn we always have more choice than we think we do. And I went through life for a long time thinking, man, I wish I had more choices. And in hindsight, I did. I just didn't realize it. So, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on our podcast and sharing your insights. I wish you all the best. I have no doubt you'll move the needle.
And thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I also think you are doing awesome work in trying to highlight this important part around what value do we actually create, and through that, what legacy can we leave with it.